Today I'd like to share with you how I can apple juice and applesauce using the same apples. I know that there's a lot of different ways you can can apples. This is just the way that I do it. It goes by easy and fast, so come along and I will show you how I do it. The supplies that you will need is a water bath canner, a steam juicer to make the juice, a food strainer to make the applesauce, as well as your apples, your jars, your lids, and your rings. I'm really lucky that I have an apple tree in my backyard, and this year it produced a ton of apples. So many apples, and they are super tasty. The very first thing that you want to do is to wash your apples. I just fill up my sink with cold water and put the apples in, just kind of move them around with my hands, scrub them out a little bit, and they're clean enough. The next thing you're going to do is cut up your apples. Now this process is really easy with the way I do it. I don't peel or core the apples, so all you have to do is, I usually just chop them into fourths, sometimes halves, sometimes eighths. It just depends on the size. And it seems like maybe you get a little bit more juice if you cut them up smaller, but I really didn't notice that much of a difference. Once you have a nice big pile of apples cut up, you are going to place them inside your steam juicer. The portion that you want to put it in is the colander. And this is how a steam juicer works. At the very bottom, you have a pot that boils the water. On top of that pot is where the juice collects. And what sits inside of that is the colander. And as the steam rises, it's going to steam those apples and all the juice is going to fall through the holes into the spot where you can then extract the juice from the hose. The amount of time that you want to steam these apples is about an hour to 2 hours. It just depends on how hot your stove is. I used an outdoor camp stove, which was really hot. So I actually turned the heat down to maybe a medium low so that it was still boiling and steaming, but not burning anything, because I've been there. So once you've noticed some of the juice collecting in the top part of the hose above the clamp, then you can stick a clean hot jar at the bottom of that hose and then squeeze the clamp and you'll see the juice just flowing into your jar. I highly recommend that you use rubber gloves for this because it is super hot and you don't want to burn yourself. After your jar is filled almost to the top, you want to leave about a 1/4 inch of a headspace. Then you could take the hose out. I clamp it. I kind of just tip it up so that the juice doesn't spill out. And I have another jar ready, waiting to be filled up, and I just stick it into that jar. Then you want to use a clean cloth and wipe the rim of the jar. Place a lid on it and a ring on it and tighten it finger tight. While your apples are steaming, make sure you check on the water level just maybe 1 or 2 times. You really do not want that to run out. You will ruin your pan and it will burn. Again, I know because I've been there. Now you're going to need a lot of apples to make this apple juice. I found that 1 large steamer of apples only provided 2 quarts of apple juice. But I was really okay with that because what I'm going to use the leftovers with the apples is to make applesauce. I apologize that this footage is not of apples, but the process is the same. So once you have as many jars filled up as you need, go ahead and place them into your water bath canner. You want to make sure that the jars are covered about 1 to 2 inches of water. You want the water to be warm to hot. You don't want it to be boiling, because if you put in a jar that is somewhat cooled off, sometimes it can crack and you don't want that to happen. Once all the jars are inside the hot water, you just place the lid on, crank it up so that your water is boiling. Once it gets to a rolling boil, I like to turn it down just a little bit because sometimes the water can evaporate and then you won't have the water covering the jars, and that's really important. You'll want to process this apple juice in the water bath canner for 20 minutes. Now this is based on sea level. If you have a higher altitude, you need to add time to that. For where I live, it is an extra 10 minutes, so I process mine for 30 minutes. Once that 30 minutes is up, turn off your heat, take out the rack, and stick it on the edge of your pot. And then you can use your jar grabber. Just grab the jars and place them onto a towel. You want a little bit of space in between the jars just for them to cool off a little bit easier. And that's all you do to make the apple juice. Now that you are left with a big pot of steamed soft apples, you're going to make your applesauce. I just take the whole pot and I sit it next to the food mill and I scoop it into the food mill. And then you just basically push it down, wind it up, and the sauce comes right out. And the peels and the core and all the other things that you don't want in your applesauce is spit out to a bowl that you can just toss out or whatever you want to do with it. Once you have strained all of the apples and you have your applesauce, stick them into a large pot. You want this pot to be a thick bottom so that it doesn't burn easily. You want to turn up the heat. This part is a little bit tricky because I found that even on a medium to medium low heat, sometimes if I wasn't paying close enough attention, the applesauce would pop as it was trying to kind of boil and it would get everywhere. So just stay close by and stir it until it gets hot. You want it to be kind of steaming and hot. Now, I know you can't really bring it to a boil, and that's okay. You just want the applesauce to be really hot when you put it in the jars. Now, when you don't have any of the juice in the apples, it is going to be really thick. Now, sometimes I make it with some of the apple juice that I had processed, but I actually wanted to try it this time with just water. So I added some water to it until it was the thickness that I wanted, and it was super tasty just on its own like that. But you can also add in some sugar to taste however you want to do it. I also added in a little bit of lemon juice just to make it so that it wouldn't turn brown. And really, I just eyeballed it. I just kind of poured a little bit into the pot and gave it a good stir. Once you have your applesauce nice and hot, you're going to ladle your applesauce into your hot jars. Once they are filled, again, almost to the top, you're going to want a 1/2 inch headspace on this applesauce. I actually found that I filled up a couple too high and it spilled out as it was processing in the water bath. Once your jar is filled up, you can just use a spatula or knife, something that you want to kind of poke around in there to try and get out as many air bubbles as possible. And again, you're going to wipe the rim with a clean, damp cloth and place on your lid and your ring and screw it on finger tight. And then you're going to use the same process that you used for the apple juice with the water bath canner. So go ahead and place all your jars into the canner, lower the rack into the pot. Again, your heat should probably be off by now, but you'll still have pretty hot water from your apple juice. And then again, you're gonna process it for 20 minutes based on altitude. I did it for 30 minutes. Once your time is up, turn off the heat, take out the rack, stick it on the side. And again, you'll want to use your jar grabber to grab them out and put them down. You could also use some oven mitts or rubber gloves or anything that would just be easy to get it out. You do not have to use a jar grabber. And in fact, I decided this year to can everything outside on my deck with a camp stove, which was amazing. I loved it. It didn't get my house super hot and steamy, and it wasn't on my glass cooktop stove, which I'm always a little concerned about. So for me, what I would do is actually I would take the entire rack out and I'd carry it to a spot that was super close and just set that on top of the towel. I'd let that cool off for a little while and then take them out. After about 24 hours, your jars will be cooled off and you want to make sure that they have sealed. And you test this by pushing on the top of the jars on the lids, and if it pops up and down, it is not sealed and you'll need to put that in your fridge and use it up as soon as you can. If it is sealed, it will not move up and down. I also like to take the rings off and put the jars into hot, soapy water just to wash off any residue that is left. Sometimes it's sticky, and I don't like having that stickiness all over. It makes it harder to get the rings off when I need to use the jars. So I wash the jars and I wash the rings and I let those air dry on a towel. Once they're dry, I replace the rings back onto it and store them that way. And there you go. You have some delicious apple juice and applesauce that you can put in your food storage and eat all year long. If you are interested in a couple other canning videos, I've made a few and I will leave the link right here for you. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.